I am so excited to talk with Samantha Shane about her session at the Nonprofit Technology Conference next week. I was wrong, owning tech mistakes and building trust. Who needs to hear about this? All of us do. We're all human, and I am so excited for my conversation with Samantha to preview it for you. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, Emily.
So, you have been telling me this week about some of the challenges that you've been presented with one of the Salesforce flows that you have been working on, which is like an automation, a workflow, an automation. Is that a good way to describe flows?
I think so.
Yeah. What's been, first off, what you've had a lot of success with flows, like just in the last 2 years, you've learned them, right? Learned how to do it and then gone to really great places with them. And you have experience in doing this kind of automation in other tools. I'm thinking of Conga and you're learning Apsona. So what are the feelings that come up when you've had a lot of success in this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's humbling, which is not always pleasant, but I do think it's important. And one of the things that I'm just like, that's emerging for me is that the experience that I have with flows has been really localized to screen flows, which seem now to be very different from a different kind of flow, which are record triggered flows. And I just kind of going into it, I thought that record triggered flows which is sort of more like automation that happens in the background. There's no like dialogue box. I thought that it would work very similar to a different automation suite called Process Builder. And in Process Builder, you can like schedule things out into the future. And you can do that in record triggered flows too. But there were a bunch of things that behaved really differently than I expected. And even though I tested it, like I tested 16 different varieties of like what happens if the thing is scheduled on the first day of the month? What happens if the thing is scheduled on the second day of the month? What happens if like all of these different things? But I didn't and a lot of my tests failed at first, right? So then I kept working on it until I got my test working. And then I thought I was done. But some of the things that broke were things that I didn't test for because they were assumptions that I wasn't aware of them and I hadn't challenged them. And that always makes me feel kind of hopeless because I'm like, well, how am I going to get better at like checking things that I didn't know needed to be checked? Like when I leave the house in the morning, I always check for my keys because I've forgotten my keys before. And I always check for my other stuff because I've forgotten my other stuff before. But I don't like check to make sure that like my sneakers still have a sole because I'm like reasonably expect that they will. And so I feel kind of confused and flustered because this didn't work the way I expected it to.
Well, it's super interesting to hear you put it that way because my next question was going to be sort of directed at a session at the Nonprofit Tech Conference that you're doing. So are not testing for things or anything else in there. I've heard you use the word mistake or that you did something quote unquote wrong. I wonder though if you're still thinking about it that way.
Yeah, I am. So one of the things that I did wrong, well, it's always more complicated than that, right? Because most of us we don't think we're making mistakes when they happen. And so one of the things that I did wrong in this project was that I introduced this bad thing called recursion, which in computer mode is if something just goes around and around and around and never ends. And so I was trying to make my flow more efficient and use this best practice in flow called bulkification, which makes me think of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Ooh, bodybuilders. And so I was like, okay, instead of running through the whole flow every time, let's put all of the things that need to be updated in a bucket and then just run through that bucket. I'm like, that's what we're supposed to do, right? But the type of flow it was a record triggered flow. So it ran the first time, grouped everything in a bucket, and then it ran the second time and grouped everything in a bucket, and it kept doing that, and then eventually it was not
spinning wheel of death.
Yeah, but I really so now in retrospect, I'm like, okay, that was recursion, not a good design for this type of flow. It now seems like quote unquote obvious to me that like this wouldn't have worked. But at the time I was like, this seems right. And the first time it ran all the way through, it should have updated everything so that they were no longer eligible to go through the path again. But because the path happened at the same time for all of them, it tried to keep running because the updates weren't done. So I got a million errors that were like, we can't update this record twice at the same time. And I was like, I don't know how to interpret this error because like that shouldn't be happening. And so anyway, yeah, so that's a fixable problem though, right? Like I learned about recursion and I'm probably not going to do it again, but I feel frustrated that I didn't catch it in the sandbox and then it happened. And sort of have this feeling. Have you ever had this feeling of like someone else, like somebody better than me or like different than me would have like never had this problem? And so I need to be a little, I need to be a little bit more, I think, patient with myself. But I also got to use some of my skills that I've learned from making mistakes in the past. And that's what I'm going to be sharing about at N10.
About
so
making
some things that I did were like, I wrote a very transparent email being like, this didn't go as well as I expected it to. And this is what happened. I'm still trying to figure out the root causes. I didn't like wait until I knew the root causes because I knew that was going to take me time. So I like emailed a couple of people who needed the information at work to be like, this didn't go as well as I had expected it to. Here's the plan. I'm on it. I'm going to keep working on it. And the worst is over. So like to set people at ease.
Do you think there's something different when that kind of email, I mean, everyone can make mistakes. Everyone, things happen to everyone. So anyone could have to write an email like that. Do you think it's something different when it comes because of a technology issue?
One of my mentors from my fellowship thinks that it does, that like there's this belief that technology should just work all the time. And when people make mistakes, like say you like slept through a meeting or like spilled your lunch all over your dress or something, then people are like, life happens. But if your technology like spits out a bunch of errors, people are like, what? You must be incompetent. Actually, that's not true. That's what I tell myself, but I don't think that's what other people necessarily think.
But maybe the impact on them of how their relationship, not with you, but with the technology itself might be impacted.
Yeah. So at N10, I'm going to talk about like what to do when you make a mistake. And it could be like the technology didn't work as expected, miscalculating a metric. I've done that. Making a decision and then realizing that you made the wrong decision, like being like, I think that we should get this platform. I did a lot of research on it, and then you get it, and then you're like, oh no, this platform sucks. So I'm going to talk through, and I think that we all have a lot of, like empathy / also like have all been in that situation. But so many times when I go to conferences, it's like a combination of like new shiny, or I'm showing off my best thing, like my best dashboard, my best process, my thing that always works. And sometimes I walk away from these conferences being like, well, my stuff works like whatever, 90% of the time, or like whatever, I don't know. Yeah. And I feel like kind of alone or like disappointed that I mean, certainly I could like do the dog and pony show too, but it just doesn't feel authentic sometimes. And so I wanted to make space for being like, yeah, we're all trying new things and it's not always going to work the first time.
Yeah. And we talked recently about seeing that on social media too, that there's a push to show the best of the best of the best of what we've done. And that not the 100% of the time that we spend is on the best of the best of the best we've ever done.
Yeah. And I think that we can actually build skills that like increase trust, transparency, communication, integrity, vulnerability. Like these are like values that are really important in the nonprofit sector. And we can use them for communicating about when technology doesn't work the way we expected it to. And then be like, and like so what are we going to do next? And like keep moving forward. And so I'm going to be laying out like some plans that people can use. And I want to hear from other people too about kind of how you handle it, and hopefully like the doom spiral, which I have been in, but at least I can recognize it, is not the only option. I was like, okay, doom spiral, and like communicate transparently and authentically, make a plan, share my learning. Like I've been like writing up this like doc of like, here are all the things that went wrong, and like here's how we fix them, and here's what I learned about that. And even just saying I was wrong, like I made a mistake, that's so much better than being like someone else made a mistake, or like that, or like I can't imagine why this happened.
I just have no idea. I really hope that at your session, which I am so excited about, that we'll hear more about that, those things you mentioned, the vulnerability, the integrity, the transparency, and not just coming from the person, which is easy to say those are human aspects that we need to work on in ourselves. But what does that mean from the technology? Like, can we talk about tech being vulnerable, and not just security vulnerable, but like having its own mistakes and needing to go back and things? I think it'll be really interesting to hear what others share about their mistakes, how they handled it. And I'm just really psyched. So are you going to be able to get audience interaction? I know the platform at NTC can be a little bit challenging there.
I think it'll be chat, but I don't think there's going to be like voice interaction, although I'll probably do the thing where I like make a Google Doc so that people can kind of live collaborate with me and each other.
I think N10 sets up the collab notes doc, so that should be available too.
So really looking forward to it. I feel like this is like a new thing that I'm taking a risk by talking about, but I know I'm going to find people who also want to talk about it.
Yeah, should folks come in like prepared with anything, stories or experiences or questions that you want them to come in with?
Well, it's a 30-minute session, so it's relatively short, and I'm going to be covering 5 examples of types of mistakes that happen. And so I think it'll be really interesting for people to see if they have a personal example of that type, and really think about how they handled it and how they would handle it differently if they were able to go into it and be like, oh, this is one of those types. Like, this is not like a unique pitfall, and have a little bit more perspective, and then be able to make choices from that place instead of being like, oh no, emergency.
I love that. Excellent. I'm so excited.
We don't have the schedule yet, but maybe by the time we post this video, we'll have the schedule so we can do a call to action of register for the session.
Yes, I believe we do. All right. Well, thank you for previewing it for us. I can't wait.
Peace out, Cub Scout.